You gotta love Taizai, man. Every freaking week, it's good. Even last week's episode, it did something that all of us were jumping for joy. Us Taizai fans were jumping for joy with last week's chapter for not going down a certain route. This week's chapter of Taizai, once again, so fun. It's so fun. Just coming around every Monday, reading this series. It's just so fun. It is really fun to just sit down and read Taizai weekly. I just want to express that, because this chapter, mainly the purpose of this chapter, besides the feud, the rift going in between King and Meliodas, there's another 2 points that this chapter really goes to serve. For one thing, we get more, I guess, clarification to King's ability Disaster. See, we know about King's ability. We've heard little hints at it. It's been talked about. I mean, we know some of his abilities, a lot of his abilities, actually. But we never got a full, in-depth, over-review of what King's abilities really were. And so we finally get clarification to what King's true abilities can. Disaster, for instance, if it is like a small poison, like a little poison, maybe something that wouldn't be life-threatening, that would, not kill you, King can make that poison worse and make it to where it can be a toxin that would kill you in general. It'd just fucking KO you. And so King's Disaster ability makes things that seem to be not as bad into something much worse. For instance, when Meliodas had a little cut, you had it to where King used his Disaster, and then Meliodas' shoulder just started bleeding really bad because of the power that King used. Which we come to find out that Meliodas can use his abilities to reflect that Disaster move back at King, because at the end of the chapter, King puts his hand on his shoulder. He's like, oh my god, I feel pain right there. And that's exactly what happened. Remember, Meliodas used full counter in this chapter. So if you think about it, that means Meliodas can full counter King's Disaster ability. And so the chapter just goes to serve that main point, really. I mean, besides Meliodas getting his power back, getting some subtle foreshadowing hints at King, which I will get into, the main point of the chapter was to talk more about King's abilities. And I wonder, really, where Nakaba-sensei is going to be taking this, because Meliodas and King have their own little dispute right now. It opens up this rift, as we already know, and I wonder where this is going to go, because majority of this arc, when it comes to Taizai, has been where the sins have been splitting up. I mean, like I've already pointed out in my last chapter review, you had to where Diane and Galather had their little dispute, Bon and Meliodas, and then you had it to where, I guess you can kind of consider a little bit of King and Bon, even though they didn't really have much of a dispute. I guess you could slightly consider there, because, I mean, the dispute between them both being fairy kings. And then you also have the dispute with Meliodas and King. So, there's a lot of issues, actually, if you think about it. A lot of little rifts forming between the sins, and I wonder how this is going to play out in the future, because if the sins continue to have these cracks form between the relationship, they're not going to be there to back everybody up when the Ten Commandments attack. For instance, some of the sins might just say, fuck you, and just go off and leave, and let, let's say maybe one or two sins fight the Ten Commandments by themselves. So I wonder where this is going. I wonder where Nakaba-sensei is really trying to take this, because I know it's going to be serving as character development and characterization for our characters to grow closer, connected with their bonds, but I wonder where it's going to go, because for this rift to be forming between Meliodas and King, I wonder why, just now it's going on. I mean, I know he realized he's a demon now, but I mean, I wonder why King doesn't really trust his captain, because, I mean, his captain has been there for him, helping him out to save the kingdom, took down Hindi when he was going into gray demon mode. I mean, you would think King would understand his feelings, so I wonder. A lot of questions, but anyways, back on topic to other things. You had in the dispute between King and Meliodas. Meliodas says something very interesting, which has been hinted at a lot. It's been hinted at more times than I can count. I think I mentioned it around chapter 80-something, 90-something. It was a long-ass fucking time ago. It was very, very long. And I was theorizing about it a long time ago. As you see in the dialogue from this chapter, you see it to where Meliodas mentions to King, from the previous fairy kings, they always had these dominant wings, these wings that are very beautiful. Like, you know, Meliodas was saying, like, why don't you have any wings, King? Everybody else, all the previous fairy kings I've seen have, you know, wings. And as we know, Meliodas has been around for like 3,000 plus years, so of course he's seen the previous fairy kings. And for him to say that, it makes a lot of sense, but he's like, why don't you have wings, King? Like, why not? Why do other fairies do, but you don't? And this raises the question, like, what is King? I mean, is he really a fairy? Is he a human? I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, I've talked about this a lot before. There's been a lot of talk with how King and his sister, how they might not be fully blood related. There's been a lot of theories about that. I've seen it in the past from you fellow Chibits, theorizing that King's sister's not really his full-blooded sister because he doesn't have wings or some other things going on here, or, you know, they're not really fairies, they're humans, or maybe they're half fairy, half human, but that kind of sets up for a possibility of a reveal very soon for King, which I am looking forward to because I want to find out more about King and what he truly is. So, I can't wait for Nakaba-sensei to finally reveal that. Now, moving into the other things, Meliodas gets his power back, and his power is fucking gigantic. Oh my god, did you see the freaking size of that? It's in this condensed bubble, like this condensed bubble that got drawn out, and it exploded and expanded, and you see the entire sky just pitch black, and that's the power of Meliodas. And when you see that, you realize the scale of Meliodas for him to have that type of power, just how massive it is. And as soon as he got the power back, you see it to where all the Ten Commandments sensed him. Like, you just see a nice good ring wheel of all the Ten Commandments, and they're like, oh, the power's back, he's back. So, that right there, I'm hyped. I'm hyped to see how strong Meliodas is, because we know he has to be very strong to be able to put a hole like he did for Dana for him, and, you know, fuck up Fraudrin like he did. But I really wonder what is the limitations of Meliodas' power, after seeing how large it was in scale, because that was a big scaled power. I mean, just seeing, you know, the darkness all in the sky. So that's about it. I mean, what was your favorite parts about this chapter, Taizai? Did you enjoy it? I love you all so much. Please be safe. Chibi out.